This is the Pixel 8 Pro, the latest phone from Google, and while there are some great improvements over the last generation, there are some things that we've been left waiting for and some ethical questions surrounding this device. This is probably the first smartphone that's dove headfirst into AI as the primary feature set of the phone, or at least a major one. Whether or not you agree with some of that focus is a highly contested topic, but beyond that stuff, when you actually dig into the phone, there's updated hardware, specifically with the chipset and camera system, and an advertised 7-year software updates, which all sounds amazing. With that said, there are some rough edges and a lot of big questions that I've got after using this phone, so today I want to dive into my time with the Pixel 8 Pro, what's been good, bad, and some general concerns that I have moving forward. So if you're wondering if it's worth picking up one of these devices over another, or if you're just interested in the latest and greatest from Google, stick around and let's get into it. Hey everyone, Kyle Erickson here. The Pixel 8 Pro is a complicated device. There are times when I'm put off or not fond with some of its features, then on the flip side, it really impresses me in some areas. Most of that back and forth sits in the software, which we will get into in a while, but one thing that I absolutely love in this phone is the design. Similar to the iPhone this year, Google has opted for rounded edges and corners on the Pixel 8 and 8 Pro, which I find make it very comfortable to hold. The back has a frosted glass or matte finish, and the color that I have here is blue, or bay as Google calls it. It barely shows fingerprints at all, and props to Google for actually offering a bright color that isn't something muted or a shade of beige, which seems like every manufacturer wants to push out these days. Like all previous generations, you've got the volume and power buttons on the right side in the middle of the phone, which I appreciate as someone who doesn't have the biggest hands. Even with a 6.7-inch screen and it being a larger phone, I can still get a lot of one-handed use from it. If there's one thing that I would change, it would be the camera bar or visor that's on the back. It sticks out about 4 millimeters, and I don't find it really matches the rest of the aesthetic of the phone with the sharp edges. I think that's one of the reasons why it's so hard to find a decent-looking case, and I'd much rather they just went with a tapered glass bump, similar to this Oppo Reno 8 Pro that I have here. With a tapered edge like that, it's less likely to get caught on something or collect dust or get dirty, and I find it's actually quite nice to rest your finger on as well. The Pixel 8 Pro is about average weight for a larger screen phone, coming in at 213 grams. And speaking of the screen, this is one of the best things about this phone. This is a 1344 by 2992 resolution screen with a 498 pixels per inch density and can reach a maximum brightness of 2400 nits, which is outstanding. Placed side by side with the iPhone 15 Pro, the Pixel 8 Pro instantly stands out as the brighter of the two. Google calls this the Super Actua display, and it's a 120 Hz variable refresh rate panel that can go all the way down to 1 Hz, which should help to some extent with battery life. The display is flat this year, so no curved edges, which makes this nicer to use and navigate around on in my opinion, and combined with the haptics, probably make this my favorite phone in terms of the general feel of things. The keyboard feels great to type on, and for the most part, everything is normally quite smooth. Both the Pixel 8 and the 8 Pro are packed with the Tensor G3 chip, which I think is much improved over last year, and this base Pro comes with 12 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of storage, just like last year. The Tensor G1 and G2 were pretty notorious for heat, and while the G3 does run much cooler, there are some instances where you do feel it warm up, like if you're recording a lot of video, gaming for extended periods of time, or using apps where there are a ton of network requests or background tasks going on. Just in regards to gaming and resource-heavy tasks, they still work fine and are totally usable, but they still aren't on par with other competitors, which is not really any different than in past years. The big thing with the Tensor chip this year is the upgrades to the Tensor Processing Unit, or TPU, which is basically where all the neural processing or AI happens on the phone. That's supposed to be twice as fast as the first-gen Tensor chip and what enables a lot of these new AI camera features, and that's where things get a little dicey. First of all, just looking at the camera system itself, there are some notable upgrades to the hardware. There's a 50 megapixel main sensor with 21% better light sensitivity, 48 megapixel ultra-wide lens with macro focus that can focus from about 2 centimeters away, and a 48 megapixel telephoto lens that also has a faster aperture or better light performance than last year. On paper that all sounds great, but in practice, there are some mixed results. If you're looking to just take photos casually like most people do, the Pixel 8 Pro does a great job The colors look fantastic, skin tones look outstanding, and it's going to keep up with most flagships. The main sensor takes the best pictures in this camera array, and like the iPhone 15 has 2x lossless zoom by using the middle area of the image sensor to produce an image, so that is not a digital zoom, which is nice to see. There's good overall sharpness, and the HDR is excellent. It can come off a bit cooler than the iPhone, which is common in past years as well, but I have noticed on some photos with darker areas, or where there's a bit of contrast in the image, it can get a little weird or soft on rare occasions. Night mode works very well on all 3 lenses, which is impressive given that that's not usually the case. Even with the telephoto lens, which is a bit slower or doesn't have as good of light performance as the other options, comes out very good. The 5x zoom works really well for a telephoto lens on a phone. Often these can be hit or miss because the sensors usually have to be quite small, and the image sensor in this telephoto lens here is about 2 times smaller than the main one. But this has a surprising amount of detail and clarity, and as far as the ultra-wide goes, I find it works well enough, better than the iPhone 15 Pro, but again, in high contrast environments, it can be a little soft or lose more detail in the shadows. The front camera is a 10.5 megapixel lens that I'm not going to comment on too much because I literally never use it, but in general, on the surface, if you're just popping into the phone and snapping pics, it's fantastic. The areas where it starts to fall apart a little bit is in the software. So like most phones, while these do have 50 and 48 megapixel sensors, they're gonna bend down to around 12 or 12.5. And if you wanna take a full resolution image, all you have to do is go into the settings gear in your camera app, and you can go into the Pro tab and adjust it here, along with if you want to take a raw photo and a bunch of other options. I have to applaud Google for incorporating manual controls into their camera app and making them super easy to access, something that Apple and other companies could probably learn from. But the problem that I have with taking full resolution images is that there's just so much shutter lag. You're looking at about a 1 to 2 second gap between when you take the photo and when it actually shoots it, which isn't great. And even when you're not taking a 48 or 50 megapixel image, it struggles elsewhere too. In portrait mode, it does a reasonably good job at cutting the subject out from the scene, but if I take a few photos here one after the other, the camera app has a tendency to lock up momentarily, and the zoom options in portrait mode aren't great either. You essentially get a 1.5 times digital zoom or 2x option here, which in itself is a tad strange. It's also weird that the telephoto lens just isn't available at all. The telephoto lens is the equivalent of a 113mm focal length, which is very similar to what a lot of photographers will actually shoot portraits with at times. So it's just a little bit of an odd omission. The video side of things has a lot of the same kinds of ups and downs as well. It's great that you have a lot of options in here. There's 4K at 60 frames per second, a blur mode that's very similar to cinematic mode on iOS, and a pan mode that has super smooth stabilization. Video looks alright if you're shooting in broad daylight or very well lit areas, but I find in scenes that aren't as bright, there can be a lot of noise, and you can get some weird pulsing light or blurriness from the electronic image stabilization in darker settings. And while features like blur mode look cool, they only go up to 1080p, which is unfortunate. There's also a ton of jankiness zooming in and out, hopping between lenses. That is definitely one of the worst lens transitions out of any flagship this year, almost to the point where it feels like the lens zoom is misaligned and the software corrects it after the fact, and I think Google has some work to do there. Having said that, there are still some killer video features, and one of them is probably my favorite things about this phone in the Audio Magic Eraser, which is where we start to get into this whole AI feature set. Audio Magic Eraser basically works with any video. It doesn't even matter if it's recorded on a Pixel or not. Essentially, you just go in to edit a video and it's a button click away, and will analyze the audio and separate it into separate channels. And I found that to work outstanding most of the time. On a lot of AI tools, for whatever reason with my voice specifically, it seems to make it sound very robotic. This does not do that, and there's a clear distinction between each channel that it creates.
Split your audio up into different channels, so you can take a background noise. It's supposed to split your audio up into different channels, so you can take a background noise.
I love seeing things like this pop up, and stuff like advanced dictation, where the Google Assistant is now way better at waiting for pauses in your speech and adding in the correct punctuation with speech to text. There's some other stuff which is a bit gimmicky, like AI wallpapers, where you can select certain parameters and it will generate a wallpaper for you. I'm not a huge fan of any of them, and I prefer to use my own. In fact, I'm not a huge fan of most of the other AI features as well, specifically with image editing. Things like Magic Eraser, where you can remove things out of the scene that have been around for a while now on previous devices. That can be hit or miss at times, but this whole idea of altering a scene to be something it wasn't just feels a bit icky. You can use something called Best Take, where you can take a series of photos and actually swap out different expressions on people's faces, which works freakishly well at times. And there's the Magic Editor, where you can move people around in the scene, change backgrounds and visual elements. Again, this works great some of the time not so much. But I just don't know that this is the best thing to be putting on a phone, at least to this extent. I know everyone wants the best pictures of their kids and wants the ability to fix their images. Believe me, I get that. But eventually, I could see this being used for nefarious reasons. I know you've been able to do a lot of this stuff in Photoshop for years, but there is an extra degree of separation there where you have to be a lot more intentional to do those things. And honestly, I just don't know how healthy it is for people to be able to change things on a whim right from within inside the Photos app. Maybe you're fine with it, maybe you're not. I just know that a lot of folks already struggle with social media and trying to live up to unrealistic standards. And there's just a part of me that's disappointed that we have so much trouble grounding ourselves in reality at times. Anyway, that's my old man yelling at cloud moment for the day, and there's still a couple more things that I want to go over with the software that sit outside of AI. Google says they're going to give you 7 years of updates with the Pixel 8 Pro, which is outstanding if they actually come through with those promises. I'm sure we've all heard about the amount of products and services Google has canceled or abandoned, but they've been pretty good at coming through on Pixel phone promises. Biometrics have also improved this year with better face unlock that allows it to authenticate for Google Wallet purchases and to use with password managers. I find it works great as long as there's enough light around you. With low light, it does struggle where you'll have to use the fingerprint reader under the display. That's fine, maybe a bit slow or clunky at times, but not enough to ever be annoying or an inconvenience. I suppose I should also mention this weird temperature sensor that you can use for something. I'm not exactly sure for what. I was pointing this at external SSDs to see if the enclosures are running at different temperatures, but I honestly have no idea what I'd use this for. That's one piece of hardware and software that makes absolutely zero sense to me, and I highly doubt anyone will use this in a meaningful way. So let's just bring this shit back around to something that actually matters to pretty much everyone. The battery. The Pixel 8 Pro is packed with a 5050 milliamp hour battery that gets a reasonably good battery life. I find it's very similar to my iPhone 15 Pro with about 7 to 8 hour screen on time, which lasts a full day no problem. The charging specs have improved marginally over last year with 30 watts wired charging that takes about an hour and 20 minutes to charge from 0 to 100%, and there's 23 watts wireless. The only catch is to get the higher wireless charging wattage, you'll need a Pixel stand. Otherwise, it'll just charge at 12 watts on Qi certified wireless chargers like last year's model. Some other wireless specs of note, this has Wi-Fi 6E and 7, and with my Google Nest Wi-Fi Pro router, I get insanely fast speeds of almost 900 megabits per second, which is the fastest I've ever got on a smartphone. Doing anything network related has been super snappy without any hiccups, and the same goes for Bluetooth, which sits at version 5.3. I've gone on runs using it with the Google Pixel Watch 2 and my Nothing Ear 2s. I just used it casually around the house with other speakers and had zero issues. Overall, AI aside and some minor issues with the camera, I think this is a fantastic phone. The design and the color look great, it feels great in the hand, especially with the haptics, and it does just about everything that you'd want it to. Hopefully Google comes through with their 7 years of updates promise and they do fix some of these issues through updates, but if they do follow through and you end up getting all these new versions and they come with new features, there's definitely potential to use this phone for a very long time. People seem to be somewhat polarized on this phone, so I really want to hear from everyone here. Are you down with all these new AI features, and is there anything in here that you find sticks out about the Pixel 8 Pro, good or bad? Let me know in the comments down below. That is it for me today. I hope you found this video useful or entertaining. If you did, feel free to press that like button. If you want to see more tech-related content or go get a perm and a mullet haircut with me and ride off into the sunset, please subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next upload.